Welcome everyone. In this lecture, we will be looking at some of the comparison operations in string, right? So let's begin. If I have a string one with the value as, let's say, Java, and I have another string with the value of, let's say, Java with one of the A's in lower casing. So if I try to perform them, if I write something like this, string one dot equals string 2. The output in this case will be false, right? The reason is because there is a difference in the casing of one of the A in the two strings, right? But if I want to somehow ignore this casing, then how I can achieve the comparison? I'll simply, let me just copy this. I'll just simply replace equals with equals ignore case. Okay, now let's see the output in this case now. As you can see, the output is true. The other thing that you might want to note here is that the equals and equal ignore case, they both return Boolean values. Okay, so the equals, as you can see in our first statement, returned a false, whereas the equals ignore case returned true. We can also use them in our if statement. For example, if I want to, let's say, do some sort of validation. So now if I want to say if string 1 is equal to string 2, then let's say print, let's say I am saying the test has passed. Okay, as of now, just do that. Test passed. If it is not equal, then let's say print test has failed, right? So test has failed because we know that string 1 is not equal to string 2 because of a difference in the casing of the two A's, right? The other method that we also use while comparing to a string is known as a compare to method. For instance, if I, let's say, I print something like this, okay? If I write string 1 dot compare to, let's say compare to string 2, the output in this case will not be a Boolean value. Let me just show that. It is an integer. So what basically compare to does is it compares the Unicode values of two strings. And what this suggests that string 1 is smaller to string 2 by a value of 32, right? But let's say if we want to uh, ignore the casing in compare to method, then we can also do that. We can simply write system.out dot string 1 dot compare to ignore case. As you can imagine, it will ignore the casing and it will treat the two strings in a similar case. So now, did I miss something? Oh, yes. Now, what is wrong? Oh, yes, it should be string 2. So now if I run the program, the output will be 0 because it is ignoring the case and just comparing the content of the two strings, which is equal if we ignore the case here. Right, so this is some of the basic operations in string that you can do to compare two strings and let's say perform some sort of assertions and validations in your test cases, right? So this is how much we're gonna go in this lecture. In the other lecture, we'll be looking at some of the search operations that we can do in strings.